talked to him this morning. I don't know, y'all were some of y'all, yeah, you were, yeah, he fell Monday, Monday, and hurt a rib, broke one, if I understand. So I talked to him this morning. He was still not feeling well, but he said he was resting and it hurt himself. So I'm just getting everybody here in live online the word of what's where he's at tonight. And so let's open up real quick in prayer. And Brother Roy, you mind opening us up in prayer? Well, today or tonight is we're going to do chapter 2 in our Trek on book. And this is discipline. Get that one turned over here. Those of you who have the book, and if you've not been reading forward, if you don't want to get I look at it. If you don't want to get hooked on something, don't go forward. The more you read, the more I read it, the more I just like, oh, I want more of it. And this book is really, really a good book. But so he starts off on let's see, we are on page. I don't know. Everybody got a book? Do y'all have a book? It might not be a night would have a. Okay. Hold on, just I got one right here. Elisha, would you go in there and get? They're right in here in a box. Would you mind getting some? There's just going to read some, but I've got a bunch of highlighted points, and I'd like if y'all will interact. I mean, if y'all have something to say, please do so. I don't mind being interrupted, and I'm not one for long words, and so we did this. We did one of the chapters Monday night, and it was about 45 minutes, which shocked me that I could read just 4 or 5 pages, and it turned into 45 minutes worth of discussion. So he starts off, what is discipline? Well, he has 2 schools of thought. One was punitive or punishment. The other was preventive or development. So I have to go along with him that I could have been classified with ADHD as a kid, as probably quite a few of us have. But that also causes you to get a whole lot of punitive punishment, because you don't act on your own. Your mind tells you, oh, I can go do this, and you don't really have a hard time paying attention to things. And so he goes into a lot of this as his childhood and what he went through. And so after he gives his two ways, he tells us that he feels like that we all could probably come up with just those 2 ways of discipline. So he says, when thinking of discipline as punishment, his mind goes to the childhood days when he was at school and at home. He would act up at school, and then he would go home, and his parents already knew about it. But isn't that sort of like our lives as followers, that we act up and we think, oh, we got away with that? Well, did we? Because I mean, most of us come to church and go, ooh, Brother Charles, you know what I did this week? It's just like that we all realize that everything catches up with us, just as he talks about at school. When he got home, things caught up with him. And he said he always seems to get in trouble in both locations. I wasn't a bad child, just active, very active. As a young boy, I was thought to have ADHD, but according to his teachers and observations. But in then, and this would have been probably in the mid 70s, and there wasn't a lot of medical diagnosis to ADHD back then. But we want to tend to treat that. I've got some friends that I know that down in Linden, and their kids have a lot of these symptoms, and they want to treat with drugs. And well, his mom chose not to, because those drugs are mind altering, and as we read later, you'll see she sort of gives the ideal, and he comes to understand the ideal of why he didn't want to medicate. But when you get into trouble in school, and he just reiterates that about the same troubles awaiting at home. It seems odd, because in the era when there were no computers and very, very little communication via phone, when you had the ringer phones, and just seeing that, my father-in-law has one now, and it has push buttons where the dials were, but it's push buttons, and my kids were like, oh, how do we use that? It even had push buttons, and my kids still didn't get the concept of a corded phone. So it tells you that, so it sort of gives you the timeline of where he was, of what time all of this took place, when there was all you had was typewriters, and he always wondered how, when he got home, his mother would know. And well, it was because the teachers and his mama had a lot of communication. And I relate that to what the Lord is with us, that we get down and we pray. So the more we pray, the more we go to him, the more we seek him, the more he knows our every situation, and the more disciplined that we become. And so I sort of equated this right here when he was talking about with the telephone and all, of how God always knows when I make my mistakes, regardless if they're in private or they're in public. He always seems to remind me, hey, I saw that. It's not like I go out and rob a bank, but I can get mad at a driver, and by the time I get home, I know that. And that's because of his communication skills with me are better than a lot better sometimes than my communication skills with him. But as I've managed to change my life to a much more of a prayer-oriented lifestyle, my discipline is growing. Not like I want it, but it's growing. And this chapter really brought a lot out to me. So we read on down. But as I wondered how information could pass so quickly from the school to home, since we didn't have communication tools. Communication from my second grade homeroom teacher or my ninth grade English teacher was always provided to my mom before I would make it home from school. But as a result, discipline was always waiting at home. Of course, it was the punishment type, not the preventive type. So without a phone or a text or the ability to email, how was my mom always aware of my woes at school? And there again, it's called a relationship. The school leaders knew my mom because she always made it a point to be involved in our children's lives. So there I go back to that, how we need to relate this back to our relationship with our Father, that the more we communicate, the easier it is for the discipline, for him to open up the discipline for us, to reach out to say, okay, so this car blew their horn at me. Is it okay for me to blow my horn back at them? Well, maybe in some instances it is, but if we're disciplined in our lives, we'll realize that, hey, maybe there was a problem that I did, and maybe they had a reason for blowing horn, and maybe they didn't. But our relationship with God will always put that more discipline for us to realize that, hey, maybe they were right. Because something that someone told me once was when I left Mississippi and I moved to Alabama, it was always stay teachable. Because when it comes to writing computer code of what I knew I wrote, I was really good at it. I knew it. But she always knew that just because I knew it, sometimes I might not be willing to listen. And so she was teaching me that. That was one of my takes was that she said be teachable, and that the more we follow what he's saying here, and with our relationship with God, we become more teachable, more disciplined. So I'm on page 45 I'm in the second paragraph. Although my mom firmly believed in the corrective measure associated with developmentally based discipline, she also had a punishment-based discipline and corrective principles. She believed in spanking. I don't know about anyone else, but I know I've seen the spanking side of it, good and the bad. And I've always wondered that, if you come on down, he starts talking about that sometimes it worked and other times it did not. I had my share of spankings and even had some that were supposed to be for my brother because he convinced my mom he was innocent. Has there ever been an instance in your lives where you knew you were being, I guess, you were being called guilty and you were innocent? Anybody have an example of that they would share? Because I shared with the pastor about one, and I'm not saying that I have turned out to be the absolute perfect, but a young man we were at Bee Lake, Mississippi, and at our camp, and me and a young guy, he was about my age at that time, I think we were 12, 13, and he shoved a glass door shut in front of me, and all I did was reached out to keep it from hitting me. And of course, when that door hit me, the glass just shattered. And my dad chose the physical side of punishment and put me in another room. This is the middle of summer, and man, we're having a ball. And so I went to a room and I sat, and I don't know about y'all if you've ever just sat in silence and with nothing to do but just sit there. That's not very fun. And so it taught me a lesson. And I've carried that through my life that, there are punishment times for physical punishment and times for this to me is one of the teaching sides of discipline. And my dad taught me a lesson. Well, the young man is in Parchman Penitentiary, and I think he's got probably about another 9 or 10 years. And he committed armed burglary and injured someone. And so his dad just let him, got on him, oh, you shouldn't do that. Don't be running in the house, go outside and play. And, I had more run-ins with this young guy that after that, but the punishment that God says to us is not necessarily always the side. It's all sometimes his discipline. Sometimes his punishment is the discipline punishment. And he talks about as we go on, he'll explain that as we go. And of course, as he's talking about that he was blamed for this, I thought that was funny that he says, "But I'm right," and he was blamed to being the one wrong. And he's like, "No, my brother was wrong. I was right." Though all those days of experiencing punishment-based discipline, one thing was certain. My mom loved us. I knew that because she had exhausted every other approach to correcting our behavior moments before she started swinging the switch or hurling the belt, she would say, "This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you." Well, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever spoke those words. I have felt those words. Even with our children, Kim and I were talking on the way here about that. That those words aren't just the words that we've spoke directly to our kids, but when you have to punish your kids, it does hurt. You know, it hurts. It hurts you more than it hurts them. And so he goes on and talks about that he calls it a lie. But I guess maybe in his context, maybe in his context here, I think maybe I could see it a little bit. But for me, that was not the case. For me, is that it does hurt me, and I always relate that now. I can relate that to Christ, because you know he chose to die on the cross, and his punishment for us hurt him a whole lot more than it did us. But he said I was confused. I see the confusion when looking through the lens of a child. How that love causes one to punish another physically. How is it that love causes one to punish another, physically spank another, or bear the burden of correcting a child to prevent greater failure? But from the lens of a parent, I see the responsibility of the burden to correct in love. So mom and dad spanking me did not cause me to doubt their love for me. At times it made me mad. But when I became a parent, I understood the dilemma of accepting discipline as a punitive measure of love and not anger. So has anybody ever experienced this from the Lord? You know, I know I've seen it, and one of the examples in life is that, you know, when we do things that we know are wrong, that it, for some reason, it just seems like that everything goes wrong. You know, I always say, you know, everybody, I walked out of Lowe's one time with a 25-cent mousetrap, and the manager followed us over a 25-cent mousetrap, and I was like, I'm sorry, I did not see it. It must have fell through, because we bought about 8 or 9. They had cut a field, and we sort of got inundated with mice, and so we went and bought some traps, and that's when I learned there was some poison that really works, but that's another story. But it was just over a 25-cent mousetrap, and I thought, my gosh, I'm going to jail for 25 cents. You know, and today, I mean, I've walked out, I used one of those little carts at Walmart, and I've left a gallon of milk. You know, but inside of me, God says, you need to go pay for that. Don't put that in your car. I know you've left with it, but go back in. And we always have. I'm not one to, you know, it was an accident, and I didn't bother. I didn't keep it because I know it's not for the fear of what God would do, but that 25-cent or $25, that what, $3.70 milk would probably cost me $120 before I made it to the house, because I'd have 4 flat tires and blown engine before I even got out of the parking lot, probably. And that's the same way that he's talking, because that corrective action is for our future, not just for that moment, but for where we are as we continue to, you know, to continue to grow. That corrective action is huge in our lives. You know, and as I look out, your shirt there, it just hit me. I'm sorry, story. One of my favorite, this is about Sandlot, one of my absolute favorite movies. And this kid I just saw, have you seen him? He looks just like that. right now. I mean, he's what, 35 years, I guess. And this he looks just like he did that day. But even because I can relate back to that movie, how these kids had their own baseball team, and how all of them grew up, and he tells the story of the I cannot remember I can't remember who it was. Who was the black guy? When they hit the ball over the fence and it went in his backyard, and he had a big old dog, and that guy didn't get on them. He invited them to into the house, and they had used a baseball that had Babe Ruth's signature on it. And this guy had played with Babe Ruth and gave him one that was autographed by the entire Yankees team. And his dad, or his stepdad, when he presented him with that ball, yes, his stepdad was upset. But how can you be upset when you've got a Babe Ruth ball versus a ball with all these, these Hall of Famers all over it? Anyway, your shirt just made me think about that. It was, sorry, I digress. As Brother Charles said, squirrel. Oh, let's get back over here. Okay, so page 46, the second paragraph. So enough on the discipline. To me, it's the preventive. The second type of discipline is preventive or development. So he talks about, remember his ADHD comment. I acquired this condition when I was a child and still have the diagnosis as an adult. For some, it is debilitating, but for me, it was a win. Let me explain. If I do not exercise discipline as a preventive development, or if I do not exercise discipline as a preventive measure, then the journey with ADHD will sideline me. So I highlighted this. There are many days I struggle to focus and to prioritize. I am easily distracted or restless. But if I will be disciplined to make the necessary changes needed to overcome my struggles, I win. If I win, everyone around me wins. You may not be free from the memory or limitations associated with your challenges, but you do not have to be sidelined by them. You may require medication at some point, but never use the medication as your go-to while ignoring the responsibilities to live a disciplined life. Yes, I'm a King James guy, so if somebody will, somebody can look up the 1 Corinthians 9:24 through 27 and read that. I don't mind reading what he has in the book, but I did like the King James a little better than this. Sorry, I did have this. I had this written. I have this. I should be a castaway, and I guess that's the English Standard Version. Should be disqualified. And this week, I just with a race, I was thinking there was a race. I think it was Utah, and it was a high school race. And the kid that won was all upset that that nobody cheered for him, and nobody. I mean, he was cheering for the other athletes, and nobody cheered when I can't remember. It seemed like he was using Veronica, so his probably name was probably David. But he was upset because he had won the race against a bunch of girls, and nobody cheered for him. Well, my case here, in that case, I think that can relate to this, that you're running that race, and if you're not running that race to win it, and to win it as against those who you are running against, not against the ones that are underqualified. But if you're racing, if you're running through life, our goal is not to beat. My goal is not to beat Joe that's out here on the street. My goal is to win my race. My goal is to beat the pastor. I don't see myself ever being able to beat, but at least tie every man that's ever tried to get to heaven. And to me, that's where sort of discipline came to mind for me. That I need to discipline myself. That where every race that I run is not just to finish the race, but to try my best to win it. And I think that's sort of in my mind that Paul is saying, that do your best, and but stay on track, stay disciplined with what you're doing. The challenge for us, the challenge for all of us regarding discipline isn't picking one measure over the other. At times, punishment is necessary for development and maturity. When a child or an adult disobeys, there will actually be a sense of correction, including some actions to prevent the undesirable behavior. Then at times, we realize that to obtain a desirable outcome, or to overcome some undesired outcome, we must discipline as a preventive measure. And I call this a disciplined lifestyle. A disciplined lifestyle requires obedience and sacrifice. And I define obedience as no time lapse between God's invitation to be obedient and our willingness to respond. So, does anybody have a definite, for just what he's saying there, a definition for that? That there's God saying, okay, here's your invitation. It reminds me of somebody, someone who lays flooring, that they were so willing to just at the just drop of a pen, willing to do it. And when a person called them and said, hey, look, this floor, it got wet and it's buckling. Can you come and look at it? And he's like, yeah, I'll be right there. I've already got the flooring ordered. When you asked me, a few weeks ago, you said it looked like it was going bad, but they were already had it ordered and ready to do it. And I thought that, wow, that was a lesson for me that, at the drop of a hat, when somebody needed me, I want to be there. Well, it was the same way with him. When somebody needed him, he was already ready. He was overly prepared. And then if you just you come on reading them down and into the next paragraph, but he's already got it highlighted here, and it says, as disciples, we must choose to be disciplined to prevent being disciplined. So for when I see that, I think I don't want to wait on God to say, "What are you doing?" I don't want to wait on His wrath upon me. I want to prevent that. So I look at we should be always be ready. We all should be choose to be disciplined. We should choose to do the right thing and not wait on God to say, "Do the right thing." So this is not an easy world with blurred lines of what is right and wrong, and professing believers living in the shadows, failing to hold to biblical principles and a principled lifestyle. One of the most discouraging realities I face is knowing my generation gave space to the younger generation to practice hypercritical living. What does hypocritical mean? I did not look it up, and I meant to. Does anybody know exactly what hypercritical? I sort of know what he's talking about, but I didn't know the meaning. I don't know. Jonathan, Dylan, y'all know? Would that be the same thing as hypercritical living? Is you should live one way and you live a different way? Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna. If somebody will, I'd rather read all the verses there. I mean, it's all of them are just Matthew 23:13, 15 through 16, 23 through 25, and 27 through 29. There's a lot in there that he hasn't written because all he was just stressing of what God was saying there. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, and he just takes it over and over. So if somebody could grab that and read that. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. I'm not gonna just I'm not gonna I don't just pick on any individual church or person, but you see, a lot of times most of the guys that you see on television or in pulpits, yes, they have on a suit and tie, you know, that's typical, and I mean, like me right here, I mean, I don't have on a robe, I don't have on my sash. I'm not trying to make anybody think more of me than what I got on. I don't want anybody out on the street saying, "Wow, boy, he must preach a good sermon today." I never want anybody to say anything like that. But if you read on all of these, that is what they did, and that's what he's they didn't live that disciplined lifestyle. They wanted everybody to think they were disciplined when their lives were not. And it went out as I was reading through, and he just gives a whole list of what all they did, and where, without living a wholesome life. These are things that as I read through them, I was like, wow, I could have done. Well, probably that did that, and oh, I was like that. And, before I decided that I needed to give my life to Christ, and so that's sort of where the discipline, and that's why to me, that's why he had listed it like that. And so, and go back, he gives a whole list here of Matthew 23 and Mark 12 and Luke 20, and they're all sort of the same, but yet there's um, a little bit different writing, because some of them give a little more detail as to into it than just right here. So once you go back and read them, he was talking. He said, confront compromising spirit that pulls on you and address the propensity to be hypercritical by exercising the necessary disciplines needed to be a disciple. So in what area of your physical life do you need to exercise discipline? Well, I guess many years ago, because some of us are big, but some of us are bigger for other reasons. The reason I'm chubby, not fat anymore, the reason I am chubby is because it is discipline for me. Some guys are big. I'm a little bitty guy. I mean, look at Elisha. Elisha is a spitting image of what I should be. He's, what, 6'4", about 160? You didn't weigh that much. What do you weigh, Elisha? But see, if I weighed 157, I would be very, very fit. Elisha is several inches taller than me. And that was one of the areas in my life that I needed more discipline, because mine was all related to my eating habits. Mine had nothing to do with anything that I had. It was all to do with my eating. Some guys are just big because they're big. Some guys are big bones. Some guys have big arms and big legs. Well, that wasn't me. I'm a little bitty fella, and over the next year, y'all will see just how little I am instead of just how big I was. You know, I did have. I went to Korea in '07. I think it was 2007. I went to South Korea and took some software over there to that I had written to teach the Koreans how to use it. And one of the first things that the moment I got over there, they were like, "Oh my, how come you're so big?" I didn't weigh, but about 480, 485, somewhere along in there. Maybe 479 was my heaviest that I'd ever remember feeling, but it's probably 480. And they were like, hey, here's a balanced diet. And I lost 20 pounds over there. When I got home, I realized I needed to be more disciplined in my eating habits. And when I put down the Snicker bar and picked up a nutrition bar. And those were areas that was an area in my life that really needed addressing. So go through your journal, and I've taken several notes that I'll share. And it says, in what areas of your spiritual life do you exercise discipline? In what areas of your mind do you need to exercise discipline? And I guess everybody has their own areas, and if you ever choose to share, do so. I mean, I don't mind sharing, because I've attended something called Trace Diaz, and while there, that is one of your big things. Is all of those everybody there is just like you. They've been they've been with been with the drunks, they've been with the drugs, they've been with all these other areas that we try to just keep ourselves away from. Or I guess we are those Pharisees. They've been those Pharisees, and they've all learned a different way, and that's through the Lord Himself. And that's the only way you can defeat those devices. And so I've been there. So some of my notes of what I took away from the chapter was go back and learn who the Pharisees were, and realize of areas of your life that you can change, that you need to change. And I don't know. I guess one of them was we can see it in today's government, that even today they try to pass a contraceptive of some sort, a really bad law, and it failed. But we can see that to me is a contraceptive law is something saying, oh, hey, here's a way to prevent from getting pregnant or getting a disease, not a way of preventing to maintain a purity lifestyle, a lifestyle that God would be honored that you have maintained. And I don't know, one of my biggest takes was, don't be arrogant. I'm not an arrogant person, but I have known in places in life that, like I was saying earlier about software, that, hey, I know how to write this. And I know when it comes to a batch code, my mind is nowhere near what it was 20 years ago. But I could probably still, within 2 or 3 hours, write a piece of batch code that can cause a computer to do whatever I want it to do. But is there room for me in Excel? I was phenomenal, and I had a young man teach me the other day. I'm not quite as good in Excel as, and I immediately, within 15 minutes, sitting down, somebody taught me, hey, look at this, what this can do. Well, I didn't know it could do that, because I've kept myself, that was one of my things was maintain and be teachable. And then I had one more, and well, I don't know, can't read it. That's my writing. So reflect on your takeaways and write about this ideal that is important to you and why. We need to follow God's desires for us not to think of ourselves as worthy of praise, but as not think of ourselves as worthy to be praised, but praise because you're worthy. You know, we aren't. To me, I mean, that's me. That's for me. Is that I praise God because He's made me worthy of that. I didn't think of myself as being. I don't think of myself as being worthy of praise. I think of God teaching me, of His teachings for me, that I praise because I know I'm worthy of praising because of Him. Take time to study. What are some of the specific ways you can apply this lesson? And I started out and I said to set aside more time to study and to listen to what God is saying. And I scratched through set aside. And during one of our discussions of this, I scratched out to set aside and said make time, not set it aside to do it, make it. Because I mean, I don't know. I'm sure some of y'all have time in the mornings, and y'all have made time every morning to study and to read and to pray. And that was one of my areas that I was a little weak at, that I didn't make that. I had time. I had it set aside to do, but I didn't make it. And after reading through here, I was like, I just need to, make that time. And a lot of times at night, I don't sleep well, and I'm awake. So I've learned to, hey, why not set a YouTube aside and quit watching your little shorts or your cars and buildings and camping, and just set aside a little time to read. And so that was one of my takes from here, was that I needed to do more time, take more time up with Him. What do you need to reach out for help from others? He says, who do you need to reach out to and help? But who do you need to reach out to for help? Not just reach out to help, but to reach out for help. So if there's areas, to me it's areas that's I read through, if there's areas in your life that you needed to reach out for help. What is God speaking to you? Be specific. And I tell you, for me, it was study, study, and study. As for every thought that I have, to make those thoughts about you. And that was when I wrote that, I started talking to Jesus and saying, I want to make every one of my thoughts about you, because I want that disciplined life. And then, of course, my scriptures were Matthew 23, Luke 20, and Mark. And yeah, I did say not just a little bit Mark. I started reading, and I really realized that a lot of this, really, Mark was very good for me. But go through your journals, and if you don't have this book, it's Trek On from William Lamb. We have them here at church, but if you're online and you would like them, I really think that everything about this book is really good. Next lesson is about intimacy. And it was, I don't know, all of them were 6 something. Chapter 6, is that what we're on? Okay, 5, okay. Well, you can see numbers, what's in there means something, numbers, I get confused as to what we're doing yesterday. But read through, go ahead and do next week, or the next one, we got 2 weeks. And but your journal, I found the more I rode in there, the more I really picked up on what some of his points, and I know it's from a man's standpoint, but there were several things that he says that, that no, not man, that didn't come from a man. That was definitely in his, some of this writing in here is definitely inspired, and it's a really good way to maintain a from every 2 weeks. Gives you something to read on top of anything else. So, has anybody got any other points? And out of the, I hope y'all online have more than we do, because there's 10 of us here. We seem to be very quiet tonight, but just not. But, yes, and y'all ever we need to all still remember we need to be in prayer for Brother Charles. I didn't see anything. I asked. I called myself. Well, I see. I got a few messages, so he may have said something back to me. But I was asking, Jonathan, and he said he was just still sore, and he's not moving around well. And, so yeah, I thought we went. My wife went and got a truck yesterday, and as it always fails, I always say, "Oh, I'm going to put an electric winch on my trailer." Well, no, I didn't, and not my come along. I have an engine hoist that's slow, but it's so easy, and it pulls about 6 to 8 feet. Well, it just like almost disintegrated on me, so it left us with nothing but a bunch of ratchet straps and a broken winch, and so it took me and her about an hour and a half to 2 hours to load one yesterday, and we worked. So I was tired today, so I can feel with Brother Charles today. But, well, that's all I have for tonight, and hopefully Brother Charles will be up and at it Sunday. I will probably see him tomorrow, so I sure hope he is. And if anybody has a tiller, they can let us borrow for a few days. We will take it. I got to work on his. Anyway, thank y'all all for coming tonight. Thank y'all for joining us online. And I guess this is our evening. And everybody be blessed and have a wonderful evening and share what God has done for you.